Let me take a moment to introduce you to the people you will hear from today. Pat Reevy, former president of CFUW Stratford, historian and investigator par excellence. Cynthia Hastings, inveterate reader and film watcher come film critic and chair of our working group. Cindy Carlson, phenomenal teacher, now retired sort of, and believer that all things are possible. Bev Simons, the energizer, tech whiz, and MAWA discoverer, and myself, Daryl Bateman, current advocacy chair and one of the authors of the resolution. In our time together, we will cover the processes that we have begun in order to implement Resolution 3, the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action. How we have begun to learn about Indigenous cultures, deal with some of the challenges, try to avoid pitfalls, discover our values and principles, and involve our members in becoming knowledgeable allies. Here is Pat Reevy to get you started on how we got started.
Okay, in February 2017, CFUW National hosted a webinar that explored concrete ways to show solidarity with Indigenous peoples and promote their rights. Crystal Gail Fraser, originally from Nunavut, and Dr. Sarah Komarinsky from the University of Alberta shared a document at that webinar they co-authored called 150 Acts of Reconciliation for the last 150 days of Canada's 150. Following this webinar, we formed the Indigenous Rights Learning Group. Is this slide 5? And signed up for a course titled Indigenous Canada through Coursera, which is offered through the University of Alberta. As a result of what we learned and a realization that we are all treaty people, our advocacy committee decided to submit a resolution to the 2020 National AGM. You've seen the resolution, and it passed unanimously. Our Indigenous Rights Learning Group gatherings have continued with Indigenous and other speakers. In September, Rebecca Hagee told us about the startup of one of the first Indigenous-controlled service providers in Ontario, Anishinaabe Health in Toronto. Currently, their programming is spread across 3 geographically distanced locations, even though they started in 1989. However, a fundraising campaign for a new facility with a targeted opening date of 2023 is underway. And we've included the link for that fundraiser in our materials. Laurie Gallant from Six Nations of the Grand River spoke to us about the central role of women and the importance of traditional chiefs in pre-contact Haudenosaunee society. Al Day of Namarand Indigenous Friendship Centre in London described the culturally appropriate, holistic programs and services offered by the 26 Ontario Friendship Centres, and they're offered to urban Indigenous communities. We've also researched and discussed the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples, especially women, in the correctional facilities and in the human trafficking trade. We've looked at the history and the current status of Stony Point and Kettle Point communities vis-a-vis Ipperwash Provincial Park. In our April general meeting, Dr. Brittany Luby from the University of Guelph spoke about the many and sometimes not considered barriers to community development in Indigenous communities. She explained the decades-long systemic difficulties responsible for the lack of potable water in these communities. She also spoke about current efforts by herself and other partners to expand economic opportunities in Grand Council Treaty No. 3 territory near the Lake of the Woods area. This is an area that was negatively impacted by Manitoba hydro dams when they flooded them in the 1950s. So other actions that we've taken to support the implementation of the calls included creating a Christmas shopping list of products that support Indigenous communities. This is consistent with the call for action 62. One of the companies on that shopping list was Birch Bark Coffee Ottawa, founded by Mark Marsalis Negwabau, now Wigaboo, and that company, for every 50 bags sold, offers and covers the cost of a home-based water purifier in an Indigenous community that is living with a boiled water advisory. In just 4 months period, a handful of CFUW Stratford members have been able to pay for one of those units while drinking coffee they enjoy. Action 19 calls for us to support positive changes in health outcomes. Next slide. We're also using territorial acknowledgements at our meetings and have contacted other service groups, community organizations, and City Council to do the same. However, recently we have more closely examined our own use of territorial acknowledgements. A short but very telling 2019 CBC Baroness von Sketch comedy show challenged us to think about what we do after the politically correct words. Currently, CFUW Stratford is considering one way to pair these words with concrete action. This would be making donations to Raven Trust, a not-for-profit providing legal defense funds to Indigenous communities attempting to have their rights and title to their traditional territories recognized as per call for action 52. This is pretty telling on this particular day because the Association for Canadian Studies just released a poll showing 50% of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed with including territorial acknowledgements, but only 25% seemed to realize that it had something to say about the land in which they lived. So the link for both the trust, Raven Trust, and for the skit that you're about to see is included in our materials. And we hope that you will use the skit to further discussions in your home clubs about acknowledgements and what they really mean. Thank you.
Hello. First, I'd like to remind everyone here to turn off your cell phones. Before we begin this evening's performance, we would like to acknowledge that this theater stands on territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Petun First Nations. We are also mindful of broken covenants and the need to make right with all our relations. And now, please enjoy the show.
Oh, sorry, hello?
Yes.
Sorry, excuse me, should we go?
Excuse me?
Oh, no, I just mean if we're on someone else's land, shouldn't we leave?
Oh, no. The theater is here now. We'd just like to acknowledge whose land it is.
I'm sorry, I'm so confused. So if we're on someone else's land, shouldn't we do something about that, or?
Hopefully we'll enjoy the performance.
Oh, okay, so some of the money from the ticket sales of the show are going to the Indigenous communities?
Well, no.
Oh, a portion of them?
No, the ticket sales go to the theater.
So is the money from the bottled water sold here going to the First Nations for clean drinking water, or?
Oh, no, that money goes to Nestle.
Nestle.
They're a sponsor.
I'm so sorry. I'm so confused. So whose land are we on? What are we doing?
It's a dialogue.
How are we making right?
Well, there's a plaque you can read in the lobby.
I don't understand.
I'm getting a message from the stage manager that we need to begin the show, so please take your seats.
But,
have a good time.
but,
Good night.
so sit down. Enjoy the show. Just enjoy the show.
And our own work has continued, writing as individual members and as a club to various government officials in support of UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which has just been approved by the House of Commons and the Senate. As well, we explored and are helping with online Indigenous programming at the Stratford Perth Museum and the Stratford Public Library. And now, over to Cynthia Hastings.
One of the projects of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee was to examine the ways in which CFUW could assist members who wanted to become more aware of the issues facing Indigenous peoples in Canada, both as a result of the abuses of the past and the reluctance of governments in Canada and some non-Indigenous people to accept the implications of that past. Our first step was to put together a list of books that members of our group had read and were willing to recommend. You will find the list in the Indigenous Print Resources Guide on our website. It will also be sent to you with the report of this workshop. Books were sorted into categories to make it easier to find works of interest. This list was not meant to be exhaustive or authoritative, but simply a starting point for our membership. To encourage this reading, we checked the local library to ensure that the books we were recommending were available, and then the project expanded. Our local library system, which serves the relatively small area of Stratford Perth, has over 850 books listed under the category Indigenous. The search results can easily be narrowed to a specific type of book, i.e. biography, history, or children's literature. A summary of each book is available by selecting the title at the library, so we did not do more than advise how to reach the library collection online when looking for print materials. We did include the library list of titles by Indigenous authors available to book clubs to ensure that our members would be aware that this collection exists. We learned that almost any book within the extensive library system in Ontario could be accessed through our local library simply by making an interlibrary loan request, vastly expanding the available resources to virtually anything available through any public library. Our project guide on our website gives the details. University and college libraries often contain resources that are not available at the public library. Our guide shows how the public can make use of the 3 universities closest to us in Waterloo and London. This guide is specifically geared to the residents of Stratford and the surrounding area, but is included as a template for any club seeking to help its members be aware of how they can access nearly all of the materials in print in Canada on Indigenous people, and to encourage members to extend their education as recommended by the Truth and Reconciliation Report. Now we're into something else. One of the members of our Truth and Reconciliation Committee was interested in viewing the National Film Board adaptation of Thomas King's book, An Inconvenient Indian. A trip to the NFB site, nfb.ca, led her to type Indigenous into their search engine, which resulted in 165 entries. It's now up to 183. They keep adding. The member was intrigued, and that led to the Indigenous Media Resources Project. Next slide. Yeah. Our work was limited to the NFB site, both because of time constraints and because all of the films on that site are available at no cost to the viewer. There is one exception, and that is the films labeled Campus. Those films are intended as teaching materials, and you do have to pay to access those. The Indigenous Media Resource Guide offers a short list of NFB films that our members have watched and recommended as a starting point. Almost all entries were directed by Indigenous people and it was only after careful thought that some entries by non-Indigenous directors were included. Sadly, these older films are most useful as a way of seeing racist attitudes that prevailed in the 1940s to 1960s, even by organizations that would have seen themselves as unbiased. For each film, we have included a synopsis as provided by the National Film Board, the year the film was made, the director, and the length of the film. Films vary in length from just a few minutes to about 2 hours. Next. We suggest that the more films you view, the deeper will be your understanding of the complex history and issues facing Indigenous people. These films are not always easy to watch, but they put a very human face to the racism and poverty that is the reality for so many Indigenous people in this country. We are all aware that treaties were not fairly negotiated. There are many films on the NFB site that deal with this problem. We recommend Trick or Treaty as a starting point for understanding treaty issues. Our media resource guide shows how to access other sites that will be of interest to those seeking to deepen their understanding of Indigenous peoples. As with the print materials package, a link is on our website and will also be included in your workshop package. It is our hope that your club will make use of these two guides, adapt them for your locality, and share them widely.
Our commitment to education is motivated by Mr. Justice Sinclair's powerful comment. Education got us into this mess, and education will get us out. In January, we presented a very exciting, comprehensive, and beautiful Indigenous art kit to CFUW's National Indigenous Peoples Group. The kit was created by Indigenous artists and educators in Manitoba. We were extremely eager to introduce it to our schools, but here's where we were introduced to the new complexities. And here to share the journey with you is Cindy and the Mawa Art Resilience Project.
One second, Cindy, hold on.
Okay.
Can everybody see?
Do you want to show me first? I can't see me.
Sorry, did you want to introduce yourself, Cindy, or do you just want to go straight into the video?
No, I was going to introduce myself first.
Okay, please do go ahead.
Thank you, Charlotte.
With the PowerPoint or sorry?
Oh, I was just going to introduce myself. I'll begin now then. Okay, and then we'll start. There I am. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Carlson. I'm a retired educator with the Avon-Maitland District School Board, as well as many other boards in Ontario. I'm most pleased to share resilience with you on Indigenous Peoples Day. Resilience is the story of a vast linear roadway gallery that celebrated the artworks of 50 Indigenous women artists on 167 billboards from coast to coast in Canada from June to August 2018. It is also the story of a very valuable educational resource that uses visual arts to teach learners of all ages about the richness, diversity, and cultures of the Indigenous peoples. I'm going to let a few of the Indigenous artists that participated in this billboard project to tell you more about resilience.
art has this ability to move you, to make you think, to make you stop and be delighted. There's a lot of beauty in art. So Mawa's Resilience Project is incredible because there's going to be 50 Indigenous female artists who are going to be showcasing over 160 billboards across Canada, coast to coast.
We've never been connected this way ever, you know, as a nation, from all nations. So it's a beautiful idea for a project.
From province to province, and cities, townships, highways.
Like, it's like literally gonna change the visual landscape, right?
It's pretty amazing.
For me, resilience is really about reconnecting with that inner self.
It's part of our psyche. I think as Indigenous women, it's in us.
And to have our collective voice being shared is pretty incredible. And I feel so privileged to be a part of that process.
So let's start at the beginning. How did this project begin? In 2018, Mentoring Artists for Women's Art, a Winnipeg nonprofit group that has advocated for female artists for decades, proposed a creative response to Call to Action number 79. The call supports collaboration among Aboriginal peoples and the arts community to develop a reconciliation framework for Canadian heritage and commemoration. Next slide. Mawa approached Mohawk curator, scholar, and Governor General Award recipient Leanne Martin to oversee the project. She was just ecstatic about it. Taking the calls of action put forth by the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, Martin envisioned a groundbreaking contemporary roadway gallery, which would be a visible commemoration of the long-term adaptability of Indigenous women and Indigenous cultures. Next slide. As Martin states in her essay, The Resilient Body, most often resilience is narrowly defined in the dictionary as the ability to recover from and cope with adversity. For these Indigenous women artists, resilience is embodied as endurance, adaptability, and sovereignty in relation to customary cultural practices, contemporary identities, the land, and the impact of colonial practices and strategies. Its strength. Next slide. The artwork ranged from very traditional acrylic paintings to self-portraits and photography. In her complex self-portrait, Rosalie Favell, a Métis artist, sees Louis Riel as a prophet. She, like Riel, believes that through art, Indigenous women artists can raise their voices to recover pride in their culture. As Riel stated in 1885, "My people will sleep for 100 years, but when they awake, it will be the artists who give them their spirit back." Their spirit is also shown, and the resilience is also marked in this beautiful painting by Daphne Ojig in 1978. In this acrylic painting, which was commissioned for the Canadian Museum of History, Daphne Ojig portrays Indigenous strength and resilience from pre-contact to the present. How many parts are there to this story? In the far left, you'll see the intact Indigenous culture. And then as you move to the right, the arrival of the European ship. Next, we have the destruction of the culture and the impoverishment. But finally, the artist shows the strength and resilience of the Indigenous peoples by showing the rekindling of the culture and the reappearance of the protective thunderbird. Next slide, please. Her traditional painting was put on the cover of the Resilience Art Cards and Teaching Guide. It was soon realized that the collection of beautiful billboard images represented a very powerful educational resource that could use visual arts to engage learners and build intercultural understanding, empathy, and mutual respect. So on October 4th, 2019, Resilience 50 Art Cards and Teaching Guide was launched. The kit is the collaborative project written by Yvette Cinerini, a Métis, Lita Fontaine, who you saw in the video, Dawn Knight, and Elder Albert McLeod, a Cree, with support from Shauna Dempsey, the co-executive director of MAWA, the MAWA staff, and Leanne Martin, who selected the 50 pieces of art for the kit. Next slide, please. What was the purpose? It was a response to Call to Action 62. The kit, a cross-curricular educational tool, was meant to assist teachers from kindergarten to grade 12 in integrating Indigenous themes, knowledge, history, and contemporary realities into their classrooms. It was also meant to expose learners to a wide range of traditional and contemporary art practices and celebrate Indigenous cultural producers. What was our purpose? The purpose of our Truth and Reconciliation Committee was to share this absolutely fabulous resource with others, our members, educators in our community, and others in our community, as well as you today. I'm pleased that our club donated a resilience kit to the Stratford Perth Museum. The educational director, Peg Dunham, is using the kit as part of an Indigenous online program, which will reach school-age children, as well as seniors and the general public in our community. I also asked some of my teaching colleagues if they would use the kit in their classrooms. I had a grade 9 visual arts teacher, a grade 11 English teacher who was teaching a pilot project on Indigenous literature, a grade 8 homeroom teacher who used the kit for her history and language arts lessons, and a grade 5 teacher used it for social studies and environmental studies, and especially she used some of the cards on Earth Day. All of these teachers praised this kit. They felt that the Indigenous art cards extended their own knowledge base and lessened their hesitancy in teaching Indigenous studies to their students. The art cards and lesson plans enriched their students' understanding of Indigenous peoples through the engaging images and the activities. I am not an expert in Indigenous studies, nor am I an artist. Bev Simons, who had discovered this kit through MAWA, had asked me to look at it. And then I suggested that I give it to other teachers in our board. Ideally, I would prefer an Indigenous artist or wisdom keeper to share this kit with you today. In the teaching guide, it does suggest that schools request the assistance of a local elder or knowledge keeper to speak to certain topics and participate in discussion and answer questions. Workshops in Manitoba are offered to educators by one of the creators of the kit, Yvette Cinerini. The Avon-Maitland District School Board at this time did not have a knowledge keeper and felt that they could not offer this kit into all of their schools without a wisdom keeper. However, that being said, I still think that we need to spread the word about this fabulous kit. Using art cards as the lens to enter into conversations about Indigenous peoples' history, culture, and contemporary realities makes for a much safer place for all of us who are on this learning journey. I will now share the features, the advantages and benefits of this Resilience Art Kit and Teaching Guide. Features. It comes in a box set that contains 50 full color 8x10 reproductions of contemporary Indigenous art. It has a bilingual English-French teaching guide, and it's full of ideas on how to use the art cards to animate discussion and inspire activities in all subject areas. It can be accessed online for both teachers and students. It includes links to other resources and templates for quick lesson planning. And it's available from MAWA for $40 a kit. You can visit the MAWA site at resilienceproject.ca for more information. What are the advantages? First of all, one of the main advantages is that it has culturally appropriate curricula that is Indigenous based. And it has a student-centered approach with many different learning modalities. It offers teaching strategies and loose lesson plans that have themed project and assignment suggestions, but it's not linear. Teacher doesn't have to begin at the first card and move through. A teacher could choose a card maybe once a week or once a month, depending on what they were discussing in class. Lessons can also be modified for curriculum relevance and age appropriateness. And there's increasing complexity and depth of understanding. And what I really liked about it was that it uses 21st educational pedagogy. There's always in every lesson, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. What are the benefits? Well, it first of all exposes students to a wide range of traditional and contemporary Indigenous artists and art forms. It provides teachers, educators with ideas that integrate and utilize Indigenous knowledge and teaching methods into the classroom. It incites questions and discussions for inquiry-based learning in many subject areas. For example, in kindergarten and grade 1, some of the images can be used for math and patterning, language arts, identity and sense of self. Science could be environmental stewardship, social studies and history, treaties, and land ownership. I think most of all, it instills respect and appreciation of traditional and contemporary First Nation, Métis, Inuit histories, cultures, and perspectives. The medicine wheel or sacred circle is suggested as the guide for ongoing and learning and teaching throughout this teaching guide. There are many versions of the medicine wheel teachings, which vary from nations to nations. But there are foundational concepts that are similar. The wheel is always a circle shape representing the interconnectivity of all aspects of one's being, including the connection with the natural world. It's divided into 4 quadrants, symbolizing the medicine of the 4 directions: east, south, west, and north, the 4 seasons, the 4 stages of life, and the 4 elements of nature, which is represented in this image of Teresa Marshall's artwork. As every lesson in this book asks for the students to respond in a creative manner. Today, I'm going to ask you to respond as well. I asked at the beginning for all of you to have a piece of paper. So would you just grab your sheet of paper now? And I'd like you to sketch a large circle. And in the center, draw a second smaller circle. And now divide your circle into the 4 quadrants. East will be on your right, south will be at the bottom, west is on your left, and north is at the top. This is your own circle of creativity. You can add as much detail as you wish, but just enjoy sketching and thinking. Next slide, please. In the center of your small circle, I would like you to draw a rising sun if you're a morning person, and perhaps sketch something you do. I'd probably sketch my cup of coffee, which I need when I get up. Or maybe you're a nighthawk. Sketch a moon and the stars in the center of your circle. And what do you do before you go to bed? If you brought along any markers with you, you can add a little bit of color, but it's not necessary. So morning people, you have a rising sun, and nighthawks, you should have a moon and the stars. And next card, please. Next slide, please. So the teaching guide is divided and talks about the ways of looking. To teach students how to view these art cards and gain an understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, each lesson plan moves through 4 stages using visual thinking strategies, which is an inquiry-based teaching method. First of all, students are asked to look. Look at the image. Become aware of what is going on using all your senses. The next stage is know. This is where the teacher may discuss the artist, the setting, the time period, to get the students to understand the image and why it was created. The next stage, the teacher is the facilitator, asking questions, discussing the why. Why do you see this? What's happening here? And the last stage, which I've already mentioned to you and you're working on, is the respond stage, where learners create some action. It can be a poem. It can be a piece of art. It could be a collaborative class mural. It could be a letter. It could be going outside and cleaning up your park. But it involves all different kinds of learners. I'm now going to share with you some of the images, and you are going to go through the 4 visual thinking strategies. Nunavut, our land. Ashfaq's lithograph demonstrates how the circle influences the Aboriginal worldview by depicting the 4 directions as they relate to the 4 seasons. What location in Canada is depicted in this artwork? What types of animals do you see? Why did the author choose to make her artwork round? As a teacher, I would then explain that circles represent important principles in the Indigenous worldview: interconnectedness, balance, equality, and continuity. They reflect that there is no beginning and no end. Wonder, what changes with the seasons? What else moves in cycles? And the response could be create a circular artwork depicting all 4 seasons. Add figures engaged in seasonal patterns. Or another possibility is this. Next slide, please. Take the children outside and have them create a circle of creativity using the natural world. Next slide. Stewardship of the land, respect for the natural world, and the adaptation to change are values that have always characterized the resilience of Indigenous cultures. For Leanne Charlie, we are the land. This epitomizes the timeless connections between Indigenous people, the land, past, present, and in the future. Here she has the mother with the baby in the with her Indigenous moccasins on, and yet she has a very modern background to her poster. What do you see? What feelings are evoked? Does it relate to anything we've read about or listened to? Explain. This was used in this grade 11-12 Indigenous literature course where the students had read about the importance and interconnectedness to the land. And here's a response. Next slide. This is by a grade 11 student. I will read it to you. We are the land, through tears of snow, we hold our own. We are the land, precious morsels of rain, feed our grain. We are the land, the grain we eat strengthens our feet. We are the land, our bodies grow old, falling back into the earth to feed our children and our children's children. Now it's your turn. We are the land. In the east quadrant on your right, draw a special place in the natural world, a place in which you find peace and solitude, or a memory of when you were in a location that you felt at peace. I would sketch being on the beach at Lake Huron and watching the sunset. It's one of my special places in the world. What's yours? Next slide, please. Nuliayuk in Mourning by Heather Campbell. This image can be used probably at any grade level to examine the environmental impact of human actions on land and water. Look at the image. Who is Nuliayuk? What might she represent? Why do you think she's sad? Nuliayuk is the Inuit sea spirit who controls all of the sea and the marine life. What is happening to her? What do you think the artist Heather Campbell meant by mourning? Wonder, how could plastic have ended up inside the whales? Where is the plastic coming from? Look closely. Up in your upper right-hand corner, do you see the small black boat? This could then lead into a discussion and research project on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the largest accumulation of ocean plastic in the world. Students could be asked to create 2 columns, draw up a list of single-use plastic products, and a list of what you can do to reduce your plastic consumption. In a very simple way, it could be used to discuss marine animals, and primary children could research marine animals or research the whale to discuss how pollution is harming them. The response could be a bottle cap mosaic with your class, take action by having plastic cleanups, or do a mural or painting using watercolors of a marine animal in distress. Next slide, please. Lita Fontaine's color photograph shares Indigenous people's relationship with water. As she explains, water is a gift given to us by the Creator. Through her photography, she portrays the relationship between art and activism. All her photographs bring awareness to social injustices or environmental issues. Next slide, please. In the lower quadrant, south, I'd like you to represent water in words or an image. Why or how is water sacred to you? Moving on to Jackie Travers's very large acrylic painting. Look at this artwork closely. What do you think is happening? List 5 different things that you see. Who is the woman? What does she symbolize? In this acrylic painting, Jackie Travers, an Ojibwe artist, portrays Mother Earth as the living being. Mother Earth provides gifts to the 2-legged beings, humans, who are the entrusted caregivers and protectors of her land. Sweetgrass is a gift to the people from Mother Earth and promotes strength and kindness. It is part of her hair and represents the mind, the body, and the spirit. Being thankful for the gifts from Mother Earth is a key value that all Indigenous nations share. Next slide, please. It's your turn again. In the western right quadrant, share your favorite gift from Mother Earth. Or you could represent yourself taking care of Mother Earth. I would draw bees and butterflies because I feel that I am a protector of them. I take care of our Communities in Bloom garden, and we just planted 215 sunflowers to represent the children in the residential schools. as well as yellow is the international color of hope. So what are you going to draw? So we've seen traditional painting, we've seen acrylic posters, we've seen color photographs as well as self-portraits. But the images from the billboard also represented different art forms, such as the one I'm going to show you now. Wampum belts, relationship or transaction? Why do you think Vanessa Dion Fletcher used $5 Canadian bills and jute twine to weave this wampum belt? Wampum belts have marked treaty agreements between Indigenous peoples and settler governments regarding the sharing and use of land. Again, this could be used with all grades and could be used with more depth and complexity in the older grades, but for primary grades, it could be as simple as discussing promises and why we should keep promises. In math, children could make their own repetitive patterns by weaving pony beads and pipe cleaners. And there are instructions for making patterns within the teaching guide. History, students could research wampum belts and treaties to discover many other meaningful designs, as well as the number of transactions that were actually done. It could also be used to learn about land acknowledgements and to formulate an acknowledgement statement. Next slide. Melissa General is a Mohawk and member of the Six Nations of Grand River Territory. Her photograph is representative of the past, the present, and the future. The Resilience Art Project and Teaching Guide provides all Canadians with a pathway for ongoing learning. Next slide. We're now at the last quadrant of your circular artwork. This is often known as North, or the rebirth stage. As we emerge from COVID-19 into a new beginning, a rebirth, I'd like you to think about a wish you have for your future. What future path do you wish for yourself? I just got my second vaccine today, and I am wishing a future of travel. So I would just simply sketch in my backpack. I hope your circle of creativities allowed you to think, but also to learn about how this teaching guide really provides every student with a way to express themselves as well as learn. Charlotte will ask you at the end of our presentation today to hold up your artwork to your camera if you wish to share, and I hope some of you do. The Resilience Teaching Guide provided me with the opportunity to educate and improve myself as an ally. I will leave you with one word, Ayakawamaswin, which means careful thought in the Plains Cree language. As we all embark on this journey to explore opportunities to learn about Indigenous peoples their cultures, and contemporary realities. I ask you to practice careful thought and good, kind, respectful intentions. Thank you for being with me today, and I hope that you too can share this wonderful kit and project with others that you know.
Ariel, you're muted. Now I can't see you. Try again.
She's still muted.
I can see you now, but try, there we go.
There, is that done it?
Yep.
Sorry.
Perfect.
As you can see, there are so many possibilities to explore. Environmental planting, art, issue advocacy, books and films, to explore and learn as we move forward to reconciliation. While we celebrate our work thus far, we know that it may include in the near future a further exploration of Bill 230, which is a bill to redress environmental racism. A blanket exercise for community stakeholders that concretely exposes participants to the realities of the history of land grabs. From 100% of land prior to our arrival as settlers to now only 0.05%. This Kairos blanket exercise was developed in consultation with Indigenous elders and representatives in response to the 1996 Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples report. We might indeed have a field trip to the Woodlands Cultural Centre, a visit to the Namarin Friendship Centre in London, an Indigenous film presentation or festival. With the current discoveries of the grave sites of children across Canada, our energy is absolutely renewed. Whatever the agenda, we are committed to it being driven by Aboriginal and Indigenous people. Charlotte Aiken and Bev Simon have been following the comments and questions on the chat line, and we'll do our best to respond to them. As a reminder, a list of resources, email addresses, and contact information will be mailed to you following the webinar. Charlotte and Bev, over to you.
Just before we get everybody's questions answered, I wonder if you are participating in the Circle of Creativity, if you could show your drawing up to the camera and I can take a little picture. I'll show mine first. I'll be brave. Here. And please be patient. I'm just going to try to capture everybody who participated. Wonderful. And let's see if there's any on the other screen. Oh, beautiful. Okay, just a second screen, people. I'm coming. Wonderful. Thanks so much. I was a little slow to change some of the slides because I was enjoying drawing so much.
Thanks, Charlotte.
And please do submit your questions if you have any questions about the art kit, about the resolution. I am sure that these ladies will be happy to answer it for you. I didn't see any questions come in while we were speaking. Bev, did you?
No, there were some nice compliments at the end, but nothing really. There were some greetings as people entered, but no direct questions.
Well, it's an engaging process and we have enjoyed our time. We've learned a lot. We really encourage you to take it up in whatever way works in your locality. Thank you for being with us. We extend every best wish to each of you as you become even more involved as allies in this work.
Wonderful. There's a lot of great comments. Grace is also recommending the Alberta course as well. And if you have a question you want to ask verbally, just unmute yourself, and that should also suffice.
And Marcia Armstrong says that she's already shared the Resilience Kit on her Facebook page to any teachers out there. So good job, Cindy.
What are Stratford's future plans with this project? Catherine is asking.
Our future plans are being driven by the Indigenous agenda nearby. They will include more work using the art kit with adults and other learners in our community. They will involve some visits to the Namarin Friendship Center, to the Woodland Cultural Center, whatever it takes to get more and more of our members on board with the issues facing Aboriginal people in Canada. And some of those will pop up at the last minute, and some of them we will plan ahead of time. But it has all been relatively easy to learn more and more and more as we've gone through this process. We've only been at it for a year, and we have learned a lot, and I think expanded the sympathies and empathies of people in Stratford to the situation that Aboriginal people are facing.
May I just add, Daryl, that as I said at the beginning of the presentation, one of the things that we are challenged with is how do we turn territorial acknowledgements that are words into actions? And it's something that we would hope that we can leave with you to think about.
We have a question from Linda Williams. How have you engaged your town area where you live?
I think we'll have more evidence of that when the summertime has passed, and we'll know how many people were involved at the Stratford Perth Museum, how many loans there have been around books and media, how many more land acknowledgements we can encourage happening in our community. And for sure, there is just increasing evidence on our streets and in the happenings amongst people that particularly the deaths of the children in Kamloops have had an impact that have left people wanting to know what is it that we can get on with to make a difference. And so I think some good groundwork has really been laid this year to allow that to happen. Cindy.
I just wanted to address a question that I saw. I didn't put it in my presentation, but I will address it. Originally, when Bev found the kit and talked to me about it, we were going to put try to get the kit in all the schools in our district. However, COVID really limited we really couldn't go and approach staffs with it. There was, all the teachers were online teaching, although because the kit can be found online, a couple of my teachers did use it when they were online teaching. But the Avon-Maitland District School Board at this time did not feel that they could have a kit in every school because they do not have a recognized knowledge keeper. A teacher that I know that taught the Indigenous Literature pilot course in Toronto, she did get the kit approved through their wisdom keeper, Chief Duke Redbird, who is also the wisdom keeper for the ROM and the AGO. So I think that would be a stumbling block. Yes, we would like all our teachers to have this kit because I think it is a really easy way to teach about Indigenous cultures. However, due to the situation and the politics behind this, if you were wanting to do that, I think you have to go directly to your school board to see if they have a wisdom keeper who would approve it. And that's probably one of our biggest stumbling blocks, although I did have several colleagues that I knew, and they're the ones I mentioned, that did use the kit and said, no, I really like this kit, I'm going to use it. But to spread it throughout the whole board at this time was just impossible, because you couldn't offer workshops, you couldn't do anything because of COVID. So we'll see where it goes next year.
One of the questions was if it was provided to teachers free of charge. And no, our club did buy about 6 kits. Yes. And placed them with various people. And they're only $40 each, so that would do like even one a school. And no, we don't have any financial interest in this whatsoever. But that's the answer to that.
May I make a comment? My typing skills are not as good as I'd like them to be. And I'd like to just give you some information about what's happening in Niagara and education. My understanding, if I truly have got it right, is Niagara School Board is launching Indigenous studies. And they've been working on this for a number of years now with the Indigenous community, and they've had various modules that they work through. But this fall, it is my understanding that this is, the prototype that they are going to put in the system. And should this fly, they are hoping to get it through the Ontario system. Now, obviously, these things take time. I don't have all the details. One of the Indigenous people that is involved in this project is speaking to our club in November. And I will obviously be in touch with Stratford to let you know more details. But I just wanted to put it out there that there are good things happening in the classrooms very shortly.
Thank you, Lena. That's very good news. There are Indigenous program of studies in every province already. The challenge is getting them implemented and activated where people are concerned about needing to have the support of a knowledge keeper to do it. So we will be really interested in what happens with Niagara. That's very good news. Mm-hmm. Pat, there was a question about the Birch Bark coffee.
I'd also like to just, though, Lena, the London School Board has made, they have Indigenous resources connected to their board, and they have integrated some of the materials too, maybe not quite as formally. The Birch Bark coffee, how do we make a connection with them? We found the link for them, and it's available online. The link is in your material. You can go to the site. They show you the different kinds of coffee they offer, either bean or ground, and then you can place an order. If you're doing it online and having it shipped to you, my suggestion is if a group of you can do it, then you can share the shipping. But we've now done it. We've done 3 purchases that way. And yesterday, another tweet ended up with somebody buying 2 more cases that are going to be delivered to their cottage. So it's great coffee. All of the producers are Indigenous. That's another thing to remember. And they have an environmental commitment. And so I encourage you to check it out, because a lot of people drink coffee.
And you'll see the shopping list availability of products when you get your resource guide today or tomorrow. Some pretty good wild rice too.
There's a question about finding knowledge keepers in our respective areas. So I'm not sure if anyone can speak to that.
I'm going to give it a shot, and we'll see. If you have Indigenous communities in your locale, they will be very keen to offer the names of elders and other knowledge keepers that are respected within the Indigenous community. We've been very fortunate here to have a few available to us, and they have been helpful and very positive. Perhaps Avon-Maitland School Board will begin to use them in the fall. We'll hope so. Toronto is certainly making use of Red Duke, Cynthia?
It's Duke Redbird. He's very well known. He was an actor, but now he does that. And the Toronto District School Board has an Indigenous Learning Center where teachers that are teaching about Indigenous studies can go and do professional development before they teach the courses. So there are a lot of steps moving forward.
And there are gazillions of resources available if one just gets if you just get your finger into the pie and get going on it. But I think the best shot for getting a knowledge keeper is to go to a local Aboriginal group in your community and find out who the elders are and how they're respected. Elders are really key to making much of this available to all of us.
And another question from Karina about the Indigenous Canada course from University Alberta. I'm not sure if anybody has taken it yet.
Our whole group took it, and it was very fabulous. 12 modules. You just register through the University of Alberta Coursera, and it will become available to you. It was free. It was, you could take it on your own timeline, but there was no doubt that the imperative was to learn and to learn wisely about Indigenous issues. It was a great starting point for us to have a shared common language with each other about it.
And I put the link in the chat to that course as well, but if it's not on the resource list, probably is. Okay, yeah. Perfect. So that will be coming out to everybody tomorrow as well. So not to worry if you can't jot it.
And if you check that site, you will find that there are other Indigenous courses that will be listed as well. There was one on Indigenous viewpoints related to education that's offered out by a professor from either OISE and or U of T, I'm not sure which, but there are other materials there too.
Any last questions? Again, more just wonderful comments. Catherine saying that this is embodying the national initiative of educating ourselves. Lots of thanks, lots of agreeing about the Indigenous Canada course as well.
The more we educate ourselves, the more we share with others what we're learning. And I just had a go around with a 7-year-old granddaughter today about cranberries and the harvesting of cranberries. So there's much that we can share just from the knowledge we've acquired to where it matters. Well, our thanks again to all of you for joining us, and the very best of wishes as you become allies to the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action and their implementation. Thank you very much. Charlotte, Bev, Cindy, Pat, Cynthia, great job.
And I just like to